SBS live streams and podcasts are supported by advertising.
אתם עם SBS בעברית.
Our guest today is Dvir Abramovich, the chairman of the Anti-Defamation Commission, which is the Australian legal civil rights organisation fighting anti-Semitism. Shalom, Dr. Dvir Abramovich, and welcome to SBS Shalom Australia.
Hello, Nitsa. Please call me Dvir.
Dvir, I'd like to talk to you, especially when we are so close to the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, about the resurgence of anti-Semitism around the world, and in particular in Australia. How can we combat it?
That's a very good question, and I think there's no magic formula or a recipe for dealing with the oldest hatred and this ancient disease. And I think if people thought that 2022 was bad and that it could not possibly get any worse, I think they'll be wrong, because the tides of anti-Semitism continue to rise higher and higher as we find ourselves at the center of the storm. And I would say that the picture ain't pretty. There's a malevolent shadow which is stalking our nation, and we've got almost daily reports of Jews being harassed and abused, either online or in the real world, at work, at schools, and the list of incidents is too long. I'll just give you context. The coronavirus of the last few years dialed up the rhetoric and really fanned the flames. We had newly created online chat groups here on extremist-friendly platforms like Telegram and others, and they not just contain the usual myth of Jews creating the pandemic, but also threats of violence against our community. So the kind of scapegoating, the kind of slow-burning poison that is amplified in cyberspace. And let's remember that social media is the greatest propaganda machine of anti-Semitism that the world has ever seen. So I think Jews feel like they're under siege. There are many parents who are afraid, and with good reason, because they know that there are many Jewish students today at public and private schools who are being harassed and intimidated and abused simply for being Jewish.
Why do you think, you did mention the social media and COVID, and I think the economic situation around the world is not so promising at the moment, but why in Australia?
I don't think we're isolated from the global trends. And if you look at every single country across the globe, there's been a steady and dramatic rise in anti-Semitism. I think there's a few reasons. I think that the internet has given every bigot a megaphone, so they can amplify their toxic and their poisonous rhetoric, and they can spread their falsehoods and their conspiracy theories instantaneously, inexpensively, and anonymously. I think that's one reason. I think the other reason is that we have too many social media posts, whether it is on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, that are not being monitored and are not being controlled properly by the big tech companies. The other issue, I think, which is very troubling, is that it seems that anti-Semitism is normalized. And the one thing that we haven't spoken about is that a lot of people are using the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist cover to promote and to spread classic anti-Semitic myths, that the Jews are greedy, that the Jews are money hungry, that the Jews are cruel and vicious. So we often see what we call old wine in new bottles. Israel has now become the big Jew, and there's a growing hostile climate and environment for Jews here.
So do you connect it to the anti-Israel sentiment?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people would say, look, we are not anti-Semitic, but we are anti-Zionists. And let's make something very clear. Hatred of Israel leads to hatred of Jews. Anti-Semites attack us not for what we do, but for who we are. And I think that, it's almost as if anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism working together in concert. And I think that there are people who hate Jews, but they're using the pretext of saying, we hate Israel. and Israel is the new Nazi Germany. And the big agenda, in my view today, is to try and cancel out Israel and Zionism, to say you cannot be a good Jew if you support Israel. You cannot be a good Jew if you're a Zionist. And it seems that all taboos have fallen away. Hating Israel is becoming normal, whether it is through the BDS or whether it is through the demonization of Israel. So Jews are, in a sense, facing this tsunami of hatred of all fronts, from the anti-Semites and from the anti-Israel and anti-Zionists.
We're talking to Dr. Dvir Abramovich, the chairman of the Anti-Defamation Commission, the Australian leading civil rights organisation fighting anti-Semitism, and you are listening to SBS Shalom Australia with Nitza Lowenstein. Dvir, so what is the importance of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day?
Let's just mention that this is a day that was designated by the United Nations as an occasion to remember and honor the 6 million Jews and millions of Poles, Russians, Roma, the disabled, and political dissidents who were brutally exterminated in the death factories of the Nazis. I think that the Holocaust is a reflective moment for us to take stock of what's happening and to actually reflect on what we can do. To me, it's always been a call to arms. It's been a rallying cry for us to make sure that never again doesn't become empty rhetoric. I think that the Holocaust teaches us numerous lessons. I think the first one is that there can be no greater failure than silence, and that silence is complicity. I think it was Bonhoeffer who said, when you don't say something, you're saying something. And when you don't do something, you're doing something. So the Holocaust carries important universal lessons that should be ingrained in our collective memory. And I always say that the horrors of the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. They began with hateful words of incitement and contempt, and with the dehumanizing of anyone who was deemed unworthy by the Nazis. So the Holocaust and International Holocaust Remembrance Day serves to me as a lasting reminder that we all have to redouble our efforts in confronting intolerance and persecution, that we have to strengthen the democracy and its founding pillars, and that we have to ensure that the human rights of all people are preserved regardless of their background, sexual orientation, faith, or creed. And also that we must never give in to the conspiracy of silence, where we witness ethnic violence or stereotyping and all kinds of bigotry, that we have to stand united in combating hate whenever and wherever it occurs. So this is the idea that we have to stand up to extremism. We have to stand up for the weak and the vulnerable, for the elderly, the LGBTIQ plus community, women who are victims of violence, the disabled, and of course, our Indigenous Australians. So a country is not just what it does, it is also what it tolerates.
Dvir, what I'm worried about is that our education system in Australia doesn't really teach about the Holocaust, and people are ignorant. If you can think that the Premier of New South Wales, he expressed regret and he knows it was wrong, but when he was 21, 20 years ago, he thought it was fun to dress in Nazi uniform. It shows that our education system is lacking. He didn't understand what it means even at that time.
Yes, I'll have something to say about the Premier in a moment, but I do want to sort of give something positive, and that is that over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a movement in Australia, and I've been one of the people leading it, but there have been also other organizations and individuals who've been advocating for it. And that is the importance of Holocaust education. And I'm very pleased to say, that governments across the nation have been embracing this push and have been instituting mandatory Holocaust education. Now look, when it comes to the New South Wales Premier, I, like many others across New South Wales, but I think the nation, were obviously shattered and saddened by this revelation. As I said at the time, wearing the Nazi uniform at any age is shameful. It is an act of enormous insensitivity. It is an affront to the victims and survivors. But this incident demonstrated the importance of mandatory Holocaust education for young people and how vital it is to teach them about the indescribable crimes of the Nazis and to inculcate the lessons of history's darkest period into their understanding and consciousness. I accepted the Premier's apology. I thought it was sincere. I thought it was heartfelt. And I appreciated his efforts to immediately reach out to the Jewish communities. We have to use every moment as a teachable moment. I think that Peretei's confession gave rise to a lot of soul-searching and reflection amongst not just the Jewish community, but also the non-Jewish community.
I wanted to ask you about Kanye West. What damage does he cause?
It is mind-boggling to think that this is even an issue, because I think there would be many people who would be surprised that we're even having this discussion given the things that Kanye has said. Like, what else does Kanye need to say to be disqualified from entering this country? There is no doubt that he is a dangerous man. Here is the most public, visible and unapologetic anti-Semite in the world today. He's got hundreds of millions of followers across the world. He's got growing fandom on not just TikTok, but other social media platforms. Unfortunately, there will be a lot of young people who believe the lies and the falsehoods that he says about the Jewish community. I mean, here is a unvarnished hate preacher, somebody who loves Nazis and Hitler, and keeps spewing reprehensible, revolting conspiracy theories about the Jewish community. And we in the Jewish community know from history that you always have to be vigilant, that words can very quickly escalate into real-life violence. And when people are constantly told by somebody like Kanye that the Jews are bad and that the Jews are evil and that they control the media and government, when they're fed all these conspiracy theories, they may feel emboldened to demean, to degrade, and to carry out attacks against the Jewish community. So all it takes is one person hearing Kanye's rants against the Jewish community to say, I need to do something about this community. So I've called on the Minister for Immigration to deny Kanye's entry when he applies for visa, because we need to send an unequivocal message that any form of racism, any form of intolerance will never find a shelter in our country.
Dr. Dvir Abramovich, the chairman of the Anti-Defamation Commission, the Australian leading civil rights organization fighting anti-Semitism. Thank you so much and good luck with your fight.
עקבו אחרינו והפיצו אותנו דרך דף הפייסבוק שלנו.